This video is going to teach you all about how to solve limits headed to infinity. Anytime you're dealing with limits headed to infinity, you always want to try to plug in the value first. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So 3 minus a negative infinity, our two negative signs are going to make that positive. What is 3 in terms of infinity? It's so tiny. If you're already headed to infinity and you add 3, where are you going? Infinity. So the answer to this one is just you're headed to positive infinity. Let's try another one where we're just plugging in first. That's always your first strategy. Try to plug it in. So we have 1 plus 2 times infinity minus 3 times infinity to the 5th. All right, so here's a tricky question. What's bigger, 2 times infinity or infinity to the 5th power? All right, so infinity to the 5th power is a bigger infinity, if you will, and because he is negative, this guy is headed to negative infinity. Let's try this one because it can get a little tricky. We're going to go ahead and plug in infinity. We have 3 over negative infinity plus 4. So truly, you just have 3 over negative infinity. Here's the question. Where is that going? What I want you to do is take out your calculator. I want you to put 3 into your calculator, divided by negative, and then fill the rest of the row with 9s. And hit enter. Go ahead and do it right now. I want you to do this so you can see what you get. And when you look at your calculator, you're going to have a number that says e to the negative something, right? A negative huge number. What does that mean? It means you have to move the decimal that many places to the left, and you're filling that in with a bunch of zeros. So when you ask yourself, where is this number headed? Where's it going? It's headed to 0. When you have infinity on the bottom, your value is going to be headed to 0. Let me show you some helpful tips you want to write down. When you have 1 over a huge number, meaning infinity, your value is going to be headed to 0. When you have 1 over a negative tiny number or 1 over a positive tiny number, those numbers are going to be going to infinity, negative or positive respectively. If you're not sure, again, take out your calculator, put in 1 divided by 0.0000 and then stick like a 1 on the end. And again, when you get your answer will be a number with e to a number. And this one is a positive number, which means it's going to be taking it. You're going to have to take that decimal all the way to the right. You're going to be adding all of those zeros. If you have to add in 10 to 19 zeros, that number, where is it headed? It's headed bigger and bigger the closer you go. So that's why they're going to infinity. So make sure you write this down on your math cheat sheet paper. Wherever you have those quick and handy tools that you need, this needs to be written down. So let's try another problem here. We are always going to try to plug in first. What happens when we plug in with this problem? Well, you're going to have 2 times infinity, which is infinity, plus 3, which is infinity. So you're going to end up with infinity over, again, infinity. 5 times infinity minus 1 is still just infinity. This is where you have a problem. This is where you have to do further investigation. You can no longer plug in. We can't factor this problem. There's no square root. We're not rationalizing. So we're going to use what I call a magic 1. And your biggest hint is because this limit is headed to infinity. You use the magic 1 when your limit is headed to infinity. So let me show you how we're going to do this problem. You know you need a magic 1 for a strategy to solve your limit when you come across these indeterminate forms. These are your indeterminate forms. These indeterminate forms look like infinity over infinity, 0 over 0, infinity over 0, or 0 over infinity, or when you try to subtract them from each other. Anytime you get this situation, you need to do further investigation and use a magic wand to solve your problem. Let me show you how this magic wand is going to work. You want to start with looking in the denominator because that's where we need to get rid of that x value. So in the denominator, we just have an x value. So I'm going to change my equal sign here to a multiplication symbol. I'm going to multiply by 1 over x and 1 over x. Again, it has to be the same in the numerator and the denominator because it's a 1, right? This is our magic 1 or our tricky looking 1 that we're going to be multiplying by. And now I'm going to factor this out so we can see what this looks like. So we have the limit as x goes to infinity, 2x times 1 over x. So if you have, and I'm just going to do a thought bubble over here because I'm not going to write out all these problems every time. But if you have 2x times 1 over x, guess what's going to happen? Right? Hopefully you see it. Your x's will drop out and you're just going to be left with 2. So when we go over here to do this problem, we'll be left with 2 here, plus, now 3 times 1 over x will give us 3 over x, all over 5x times 1 over x will leave us with 5, and negative 1 times 1 over x is negative 1 over x. Well, now we can go ahead and plug in. Because watch what happens. 2 plus 3 over infinity all over 5 minus 1 over infinity. Now hopefully you remember those notes that I showed you. What happens, oh yeah, right there, when you have 1 over a huge number? It's going to head to 0. So what we're going to do here, 3 over infinity goes to 0. 1 over infinity goes to 0, which means you are left with 2/5 for your answer. Let's try another problem. Again, if we go ahead and plug in here, you're going to end up with infinity over infinity. So we're going to use a magic 1. Remember, you want to focus on the denominator. So since that x value is to the first power, that's the magic 1 that we will multiply by. So, multiplication symbol here, we're going to multiply by 1 over x, 1 over x. We'll go ahead and multiply this through. The limit as x goes to infinity, 7 times 1 over x is 7 over x. Now we've got negative 6 x to the 5th over x. So I'm going to just do a little thought bubble over here. So if I have 6x to the 5th times 1 over x, that means this guy drops and one of my exponents drops. So over here I have negative 6x to the 4th all over x times 1 over x is just going to be a 1 plus 3 times 1 over x is 3 over x. Now we can go ahead and plug in 7 over infinity minus 6 times infinity to the 4th all over 1 plus 3 over infinity. And if you remember, a number over infinity goes to 0. This guy's headed to 0. This guy's headed to 0. So what are we left with? Well, in the numerator, negative 6 times infinity to the 4th is just negative infinity all over 1. So your answer, negative infinity. All right, with this problem, we have a higher exponent in the denominator, so we're going to work with that. Again, if you plug in infinity to this problem, you're going to end up with infinity over infinity, which is a no-go. So here we go with our magic 1. We have 1 over x cubed divided by 1 over x cubed. the limit as x goes to infinity. Let's multiply it out. That's nice. Our exponents will drop. We're left with a 2 plus 7 over x cubed. Your denominator, this guy to here, that's going to drop as a 1 minus, now let's talk about what happens here. Negative x squared. Here's my thought bubble over here. We have negative x squared times 1 over x cubed. So all of these x's drop out, and you're left with 1x in the bottom. So here we're left with a minus 1 over x. Plus, if we do x times x to the third, here's another thought bubble for you, if you need it. We have x times 1 over x cubed. This guy drops out, and this guy drops one of his x's, so that becomes 1 over x squared. Plus 7 over x cubed, multiplying that last portion there. Now let's see what happens when we plug in our x is infinity. So we will have 2 plus 7 over infinity cubed, which is just infinity, 1 minus 1 over infinity, plus 1 over infinity squared, plus 7 over infinity cubed. And you're all hopefully getting super excited because you see that this guy goes to 0, this guy goes to 0, so does this one and this one. And so you are left with 2 over 1, which is 2. Now looking at this problem, you always try to plug in first. When we plug in, we're going to end up with infinity over infinity. So we have to do more investigation. We can't factor. We do have a square root. We could possibly rationalize, but the biggest indicator here is that x is going to negative infinity. And when that happens, you really want to use a magic 1. This is going to be a tricky magic 1 to make it work in the numerator and the denominator. So look at how we're going to write this problem out. The denominator has x to the first power. The numerator is x squared, but it's under a square root. So let me work with you on something here. What we're going to do is our denominator is going to be 1 over x, but our numerator is going to be the square root of 1 over x squared. The thing is, this has to be a 1. And the first thing we have to talk about is if the numerator and the denominator actually match. So let me show you here. Let's take a thought bubble. If we take this square root of 1 over x squared, you can rewrite it as the square root of 1 over the square root of x squared. Well, the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of x squared is x. So now you see that our denominator and our numerator are the same. They just look different. But it's okay as long as it's a 1. So now let me show you how we multiply this out. We have the limit as x goes to negative infinity. We can multiply within the square root. So we've got the square root of 5x squared times 1 over x squared. Our x squareds will drop. We're left with 5 minus 2 over x squared all over x times 1 over x is 1 plus 3 over x. At this point, we can go ahead and plug in our value. So we have the square root of 5 minus 2 over infinity squared. And it was a negative infinity, but it's squared, so it doesn't change the problem here. 1 plus 3 over negative infinity. So what we have here is this guy's going to 0, and this guy is going to 0. But this guy is going to 0 from the negative side. Because this is coming from the negative side, this negative is going to stay with our problem, so this answer is actually negative square root of 5. This problem is similar to the last one, where our tricky magic 1 will be a 1, but the numerator and the denominator are actually going to look different. So let's take a look. We're going to multiply. The denominator has an x value, a squared x value, so we want that in the denominator. But in the numerator here, what we can do is the square root of 1 over x to the 4th. Because if you take the square root of x to the 4th, you get x squared, and the square root of 1 is 1. So again, this works for our problem, even though the numerator and the denominator look different. We have the limit as x goes to negative infinity. We'll multiply inside the square root, so you've got the square root of 3x to the 4th times 1 over x to the 4th, which gives us 3. Plus, now this guy you're going to have 1 over x cubed, because one of the exponents drops with the x you're multiplying by. Now in the denominator, our x squared drop to make a 1, minus 8 over x squared. At this point, we can go ahead and plug in the square root of 3 plus 1 over infinity, all over 1 minus 8 over infinity. So we know that this part goes to 0, and we know that this part goes to 0. Therefore, we are left with the square root of 3 over 1, so the square root of 3. Bonus.